She had worked in that penthouse for 8 years. 8 years of polishing marble floors she would never own. 8 years of folding towels for a man who had never once asked her name, even though it was printed right there on the little badge above her heart. 8 years of smiling through a pain so deep, so private, so carefully hidden, that not a single soul in that gleaming 42-story building had ever thought to ask, "Are you okay, Caroline?" Not one, and she had made sure of it. But on one cold Tuesday night in February, everything changed, because that was the night Nathan Cole, billionaire, founder of Cole Capital, a man who trusted no one and questioned everything, decided to follow her. He did not know what he was looking for. He told himself it was instinct. He told himself he was just being cautious. He told himself a lot of things that night. But what he found in that rundown hospital on the south side of Chicago would shatter every wall he had spent 20 years building around himself, and it would change both of their lives forever. Stay with us, because by the end of this story, you will not be the same person you were when you pressed play. Welcome to True Spark Stories. We tell the stories the world forgot to notice. While you're here, drop a comment and tell us which part of the city you're joining us from. We'd love to know. Caroline Webb was 38 years old, and she had the kind of face that made people feel immediately at ease. Warm brown eyes, a quiet smile, the steady presence of someone who had seen hard things and chosen grace over bitterness. She was born in Knoxville, Tennessee, the second of 4 children, raised by a mother who worked 2 jobs and still managed to have dinner on the table every night. She understood from a very young age what it meant to carry things without complaining. She had moved to Chicago at 22 with $40 and a bag of clothes, chasing a dream she could not quite name yet. She had waitressed, she had cleaned offices, she had taken whatever work put food on the table and kept the lights on. And then, 8 years ago, through a domestic staffing agency on the north side, she had been placed at the penthouse apartment of Nathan Cole. The job paid well. The hours were structured. The man himself was rarely there before she finished, and on the days he passed through rooms like weather. Present one moment, gone the next, leaving behind the faint smell of expensive coffee and zero conversation. Caroline had told her friend Janelle about him once. "Is he mean?" Janelle had asked. "No," Caroline had said. "He's just not there. Like a building with all its lights off." Nathan Cole had grown up in Gary, Indiana, the son of a steelworker and a school secretary. He had scholarships and stubbornness and a brain that ran like a machine. He had built Cole Capital from a spare bedroom at 26, and by 40 he had more money than he knew what to do with and fewer people in his life than he could count on one hand. He had a private chef he barely spoke to, a personal assistant he communicated with entirely through email, and a housekeeper named Caroline Webb, whom he had passed in the hallway approximately 400 times in 8 years, and whose name he had learned, to his own private shame, only last Thursday, by glancing at her badge. "You've been here 8 years, his assistant Donna had mentioned once, matter-of-factly. "Did you know your housekeeper has a perfect record? Never late, never called out sick, never broken a single thing." "Good," Nathan had said, and that had been the end of it. But something had been different about Caroline lately. Nathan noticed things. It was his nature, the thing that had made him extraordinary in business, the ability to sense when something in a room had shifted even before he could articulate what. And something had shifted in Caroline. It started small. A Tuesday, 3 weeks before that February night, when she had dropped a glass in the kitchen and stood over the broken pieces for a long, strange moment, not moving, not cleaning it up, just standing there with her hands at her sides and her eyes somewhere else entirely. He had watched her from the hallway, unseen, and felt an odd tightening in his chest. Then there were the phone calls she took in the supply closet. He had passed the door twice and heard the low, controlled sound of her voice, not angry, not frantic, but careful. The voice of someone working very hard not to fall apart. And her eyes. He had not been a man who looked at people's eyes. But one morning he had walked into the kitchen, and she had been standing at the window with a mug of cleaning solution in her hand, staring out at Lake Michigan, and the look on her face, the unguarded, naked, devastating look, had stopped him in the doorway. She had sensed him and turned immediately. The smile came back. "Good morning, Mr. Cole. Coffee is ready." "Thank you," he said. He took his coffee to his office and sat with it untouched for 11 minutes. What was she carrying? Why did she look like that when she thought no one was watching? And why had no one in 8 years ever thought to ask? On the Tuesday night it happened, Nathan had been leaving the building late. He had no particular reason to be walking toward the parking structure at that hour. His driver usually came to the lobby, but something, he would later struggle to explain this to himself, had made him walk. He saw her at the corner of Michigan and Wacker. She was in her street clothes now, moving fast, head down, a worn canvas bag over one shoulder. He recognized her immediately. He watched her flag down a bus, check her phone with a tight, anxious look, and disappear through the doors. Nathan Cole stood on the sidewalk in the cold for a moment. He should have called his driver. He should have gone home. Instead, almost without deciding to, he hailed a cab. "Follow that bus," he said. The driver turned around and looked at him. "Sir, just drive south. Michigan to 31st. I'll tell you when to stop." And that's when he realized this was not going to be a simple night. The cab moved through Chicago like a slow river, and Nathan sat in the back seat watching the city change around him. He knew this part of the drive. He had driven through the South Side 100 times on the way to meetings. But sitting in that cab, following a bus carrying a woman he had employed for 8 years and barely knew, the streets felt different, slower, more real. The bus stopped at 28th Street. He watched Caroline step off, pull her coat tighter, and walk east. Nathan paid the driver and followed on foot, half a block behind, feeling faintly ridiculous. He was 52 years old, and he was tailing his housekeeper through the South Side at 8:30 at night. If anyone he knew saw him, he wasn't sure what he would say. But nobody saw him, and he kept walking. She turned into a building he knew, Midway Office Tower. He had attended a conference there 2 years ago, a standard commercial building, nothing remarkable. He watched her badge in through the service entrance. Nathan stood on the sidewalk for a moment. Then he found a coffee shop across the street, took a window seat, and waited. 2 hours passed. He ordered 3 coffees he barely touched. He answered 7 emails. He watched the windows of Midway Tower and wondered what he was doing here. At 10:40, she came back out. She was carrying a mop bucket. She set it outside the service entrance, stretched her lower back with both hands the way someone does when they have been on their feet for 6 hours too long, and then went back inside. A second job. She was working a second job. After cleaning his penthouse from 6 in the morning until 2 in the afternoon, Caroline Webb was cleaning office floors until midnight. Nathan felt something move through him that he did not have a clean name for. It was not pity. It was something more uncomfortable than pity, something closer to shame. She came out at 10 past midnight. The street was quiet. She pulled out her phone, looked at it, and her whole body changed. Her shoulders dropped, the professional tension left her face, and for just a moment she looked like a different person entirely, younger, softer, someone who had just been reminded why she was doing all of this. She was looking at a photo. Nathan was too far away to see who was in it. She put the phone away and started walking toward the bus stop on 35th Street. She did not walk the way people walk when they are going home. She walked the way people walk when home is not the next stop. He followed. Mercy Children's Hospital sat on the corner of 35th and Michigan like a quiet promise. The lights in the lobby were warm gold against the February dark. Nathan watched Caroline push through the front doors and disappear inside. He stood on the sidewalk for a long moment. A hospital. He crossed the street and went in. The woman at the front desk barely looked up. He was a man in a good coat in a hospital lobby at midnight. People came in at all hours. She handed him a visitor pass without a word and told him pediatric oncology was on the 4th floor. He had not told her where he was going. He would think about that detail later. how she had said pediatric oncology without him asking, as if she had seen him come in before, as if he were expected, or as if they had seen Caroline come in before, and assumed reasonably that anyone who followed her that late at night was there for the same reason. The elevator was slow. Nathan rode it to the 4th floor and stepped out into a corridor of warm yellow light and the specific hush of a children's ward at night, the soft beeping of monitors, the muffled sound of a TV from somewhere down the hall, the low murmur of a nurse at the station. He walked slowly. He was not sure what he was looking for. He told himself he would turn around in a minute. He told himself this had already gone too far. And then he saw her through the small window in a door at the end of the hall. Room 409. Caroline was sitting on the edge of a hospital bed. Beside her, propped up against 2 pillows, was a boy, 8 years old maybe, small and pale, with the look that children in oncology wards have. A brightness in the eyes that seems almost defiant, like the body is sick but the spirit refuses to negotiate. He had a drawing in his hand. He was showing it to Caroline and she was laughing. Not a polite professional laugh, a full laugh. The kind that starts deep and takes over your whole face. The kind of laugh Nathan had never once heard from her in 8 years. The boy beamed. Caroline took the drawing and looked at it for a long time, and the laugh softened into something Nathan could not name. Something that lived in the space between joy and grief and stayed there, permanent, because some feelings do not resolve. She said something. Nathan could not hear through the door, but he could read the shape of it. "I love it," she said. "It's perfect." The boy reached up and patted her hand with the easy, total confidence of a child who has never once doubted that the person beside him loves him completely. And Caroline pressed his small hand between both of hers and held it there. Nathan stood in that hallway and felt the floor shift under him. Not literally, but something had moved, something in the structure of what he thought he understood about his own life. He had built a company from nothing. He had sat in rooms with senators and CEOs. He had made decisions that changed the financial futures of thousands of people. He had believed, privately, that because he had done hard things, he understood what hard things looked like. He had understood nothing. He was still standing there when the door opened, and Caroline stepped into the hall. She stopped. He stopped. For a moment, neither of them said anything at all. The hallway felt very bright, very quiet. Caroline looked at him the way you look at something that should not logically exist in the place you are currently standing. A kind of rapid, silent accounting of the situation. Then she straightened, squared her shoulders, and the professional mask came back. Not all the way, because they were both too far outside the penthouse for that to fully work, but enough. "Mr. Cole," she said. Her voice was perfectly level. "Can I help you?" Nathan opened his mouth. He had no idea what to say, because the question he actually wanted to ask, the question that had been building in him since that morning at the kitchen window, since the supply closet, since the dropped glass 3 weeks ago, was not something he knew how to put into words yet. The question was, why didn't you tell anyone? And underneath it, the real question, why didn't I notice? "I can explain," Nathan started. "You followed me," Caroline said. "It was not a question. He stopped, tried again. "Yes." She looked at him for a long moment. He could see her doing the calculation, the complex, delicate math of dignity and employment and exhaustion and how much of yourself you can afford to expose in front of the man who signs your paycheck. "Why?" she asked. "Because something was wrong," he said. "Or, I thought something was wrong, and I didn't know how to ask, so He heard how it sounded. He stopped talking. Caroline looked at the door of room 409, then back at him. The mask was still mostly there, but behind it he could see it clearly now, the thing he had been sensing for weeks. "The weight, that's my son in there," she said quietly. "His name is Mason." She said it without drama, without ceremony. "The way you state a fact that is the most important fact in your entire life." Nathan nodded slowly. "How long?" "He's had leukemia for 14 months. He felt the words land. "He's 8 years old," she continued. He was 3 when his mama died. Her name was Deb. She was my best friend from back home in Tennessee. She made me promise." She paused. "Just a beat. I swore to her I would protect her son, and I have kept that promise every single day since." Nathan said nothing. There was nothing to say. Some things require silence. "Does he have family, other family?" "No, it's just us." She said it with a steadiness that cost her something to produce. He could see it. "And the treatment he's on now is managing it," she said. "But it's not enough. What he needs is a bone marrow transplant. The doctor says it gives him a 75% survival rate." She paused again. "Without it, the odds reverse." Nathan kept his voice even. "What does the transplant cost?" Caroline looked at him. He had the feeling she was deciding something, not whether to tell him exactly, but how much of herself she was willing to let him see. "The foster care insurance covers some of it," she said. "I have $47,000 in debt from what it didn't cover, and I still need $180,000 more for the transplant and the follow-up care." She said the number like she had said it 1,000 times in her own head, like it was a door she had been standing in front of for months, pressing her full weight against, and it would not open. "That's why the second job," Nathan said. "That's why the second job. If you're still watching, up to now, type, 'I'm still here' in the comments. We see every single one. You are the reason we tell these stories." "How long have you been doing 2 jobs? 11 months, and sleeping how much?" She almost smiled, not with warmth, with the weary, ironic recognition of someone who has been asked a question they already know the answer to. 4 hours. If I'm lucky. Eating? I eat." He looked at her. She met his eyes without flinching. 1 meal, she said. Usually, Nathan had spent his entire career in rooms where people negotiated over money. He had seen people cry over money. He had seen people lie, betray, destroy relationships over money. He understood money the way a surgeon understands a scalpel, as a tool, neither good nor evil, only as useful as the hands holding it. He had never stood in a hospital hallway at midnight next to a woman who had been slowly dismantling herself, piece by piece, for 11 months, in silence, for a child who was not technically hers, and felt the weight of money the way he felt it now, like something he had been hoarding without knowing it, like something that had a use he had not understood until this exact moment. "Why didn't you ask for help?" he said. He did not mean it as an accusation, but it came out with an edge he could not entirely smooth away. She looked at him for a long time. "Ask who?" she said. "Who was I supposed to ask?" He had no answer for that, because the honest answer was him. She could have asked him. She worked in his home every day, and he had spent 8 years being so unavailable, so sealed off, so committed to the fortress he had built around himself, that she had never once considered it a real possibility. He had made himself unreachable, and a child had nearly paid for it. "I'm not ashamed of my life, Mr. Cole," Caroline said. Her voice was quiet and absolutely steady. "I want you to understand that. I'm not asking for pity. I have never asked for pity in my life. I've worked for everything I have. I've kept every promise I ever made, and I'm going to find that $180,000 somehow. I am," she said those last 2 words like a vow, like something she was renewing, right there in the hallway, in front of a witness. "I know you will," Nathan said, and he meant it. She nodded. "Look back at the door of room 409. "I should get back in there," she said. "He doesn't like to wake up and not see me." "Of course," Nathan said. She pushed the door open, and Nathan Cole stood alone in that corridor for a very long time. What would you have done in his place, if you had just learned that someone who worked for you, someone you passed every day without seeing, had been carrying this weight alone for almost a year? Think about it, because his answer is coming, and it is going to change everything. Nathan did not sleep that night. He went home to his penthouse, the one Caroline had cleaned that morning, the marble floors she had polished, the towels she had folded before leaving at 2 in the afternoon to rest for an hour before her second shift, and he sat in his kitchen in the dark and thought about every conversation he had not had in 8 years. He thought about the Tuesday. She dropped the glass and stood over the pieces. He thought about the phone calls from the supply closet, He thought about the morning at the window, the look on her face when she believed no one was watching, the look of someone who has reached the end of something and is not sure what is on the other side. He thought about Mason, propped up against two pillows in room 409, holding up a crayon drawing with the grin of a boy who still believed the world was fundamentally good. At 3 a.m, Nathan opened his laptop. He pulled up his personal accounts. He did the math, not because he needed to, the number was nothing to him, a rounding error in a portfolio worth 11 figures, but because he wanted to look at it. He wanted to feel the reality of it. $250,000. Enough for the transplant, enough for the follow-up care, enough for complications if they came, enough to close the gap completely and put a buffer between Mason and the thing that was trying to take him. He stared at the number for a long time. Then he called Donna. It was 3:17 in the morning, and he was calling his assistant. She answered on the second ring because she had worked for him for 9 years, and she knew better than to let his calls go to voicemail. "I need you to set up a transfer first thing tomorrow," he said. "Personal account. $250,000. I'll send you the details in the morning." "Of course," Donna said without missing a beat. She had learned not to ask Nathan Cole for context until he was ready to give it. "Anything else?" "No," he said, and then, "Yes. Find out what the best pediatric oncology specialist in Chicago charges for a consultation, private, and book it. I'll have it for you by 8. "Thank you," he said. He almost hung up. "Donna, how long have you worked for me?" A pause. 9 years in April. Do I ask how you're doing? Regularly?" Another pause. Longer this time. "Not regularly," she said carefully. "But you always remember my kids' birthdays, so I think you're doing better than you give yourself credit for." He was quiet for a moment. "Good night, Donna." "Good night, Mr. Cole." The next morning, Caroline arrived at the penthouse at 5:58, 2 minutes early as always. She let herself in with her key, set her bag in the supply closet, and began her routine. Nathan was waiting in the kitchen. She stopped when she saw him. He was already dressed, coffee in hand, and there was something different about him, a stillness that was not his usual absence but something closer to deliberateness, like a man who had made a decision and was still carrying it. "Good morning, Mr. Cole," she said. The mask, the professionalism, the distance she had built to protect herself. "Good morning, Caroline." He set down his coffee. "Sit down, please." She looked at him. "I want to tell you something," he said, "and I want you to let me finish before you say anything. Can you do that?" She sat. Her hands were folded on the table. Her back was straight. She was the most composed person he had ever seen. "I thought about it all night," he said. "I thought about what you told me. I thought about Mason, and I thought about the fact that I have been walking past you for 8 years, and I never once, not once, saw what was right in front of me." He stopped, steadied himself. "I'd like to cover Mason's medical costs, all of them. The transplant, the follow-up care, the complications if there are any. I've already had my assistant set up the transfer. $250,000. Silence. Caroline looked at him. Her hands were still. Her face was very still. "Mr. Cole," she started. "I know," he said. "I know what you're going to say. I know you don't want charity. I know you've worked for everything and you're going to find a way. I believe you. I believe every word of it." He leaned forward slightly. "But Mason does not have the time it will take you to find a way. And I have the money sitting in an account doing nothing. So let me do this, please." He had not said please to someone, really meant it, felt the full weight of the word in longer than he could remember. Caroline looked at the table. He watched her jaw tighten, watched her breathe. She looked at him. "Okay," she said, one word. And it cost her everything to say it. He could see it. The price of accepting what you need from someone you did not expect to need it from. "Thank you," he said quietly. "Thank you," she said. And then she stood up, straightened her uniform, and went back to work. The transfer went through that afternoon. 3 hours later, Caroline was sitting alone in the waiting room at Mercy Children's Hospital when her phone buzzed with a bank notification. She read it. Then read it again. She folded forward in the plastic chair. pressed her face into her hands and wept, silently, completely, privately, for the first time in 11 months. Nobody in the waiting room noticed. Nobody saw. It was the most alone she had felt since the day Deb died, and it was also somehow the least alone she had felt since then, too. The transplant was scheduled. The weeks that followed were the longest of Caroline's life. She stayed at the hospital every night she could. She read to Mason until he fell asleep. She learned to sleep in a plastic chair. She learned to eat vending machine food and call it dinner. She learned the names of every nurse on the 4th floor, and they learned hers. And on the hard nights, the nights when Mason's fever spiked or the numbers came back uncertain, they would check on her too, because they had come to understand that she was not just his caregiver. She was his mother, in every way that mattered, in every way that was real. 3 weeks into the recovery, Mason grabbed her hand and said, "Mom, I'm going to be okay." He said it with total conviction. 8 years old, a body fighting for its life, and he said it like a fact, like something he had simply decided. Caroline pressed his hand against her cheek. "I know, baby," she whispered. "I know you are." But inside she was still afraid. Because love does not stop being afraid just because the person you love tells you not to worry. Fear is the cost of love. It is the tax you pay for caring about someone more than you care about yourself. Do you believe in destiny? Or was all of this Deb's promise, 8 years in that penthouse, the night Nathan followed her, the moment he was standing in exactly the right place to finally see her? Was all of it just coincidence? Keep watching, because the answer is about 3 minutes away. 3 months and 4 days after the transplant, Caroline was asleep in the chair beside Mason's bed when the sound woke her. Not a monitor, not a nurse, just a voice. Small and clear and absolutely certain of itself. Mom. She was awake before she had consciously decided to be. Her hand found his before her eyes were fully open. Mason was looking at her. His eyes were clear, alert. His color had changed. Even in the dim morning light she could see it, the shift from the gray-tinged pallor of the last 3 months to something warmer, more present, more him. "Hey," he said. "Hey," she said. And then she could not say anything else because there was nothing in her that was not entirely occupied with the feeling of this moment, the feeling of sitting in a plastic hospital chair at 6 in the morning, sleep-deprived and wrinkled and completely undone, watching her son look at her like she was the most stable thing in a world that had been unstable for too long. Dr. Patricia Osei appeared in the doorway 20 minutes later with the kind of deliberate, almost careful calmness that doctors adopt when they are carrying good news and want to deliver it without causing someone to faint from relief. "The labs came back this morning," she said. She looked at Caroline. "The transplant has taken. His numbers are where we need them to be." Caroline nodded. She was very still. "He's not out of the woods completely," Dr. Osei continued. "We'll monitor him closely for the next 6 months. But Caroline," she stopped, took a breath. "He's going to be okay." Later, Caroline would not be able to tell you exactly what happened in the next 60 seconds. She remembered Mason's hand in hers. She remembered Dr. Osei quietly excusing herself to give them the room. She remembered the window, February again, a full year since the night Nathan had followed her, and the sky outside was doing something that Chicago skies almost never did in February, which was letting in the kind of light that felt like a beginning. She remembered pressing Mason's hand to her cheek, and she remembered him saying, "Don't cry, Mom, I told you I was going to be okay." And she remembered laughing, a full, real, helpless laugh, the kind that lives in the throat for months and finally breaks free, and saying, I know you did." Nathan arrived at the hospital at 7 that morning. He had been getting updates from Dr. Osei's office through his assistant, not intrusively, not without Caroline's knowledge. She had agreed to it in one of the quieter moments of the past 3 months when they had developed cautiously and without ceremony, something that might eventually be called a friendship. He took the elevator to the 4th floor. He walked down the corridor. He stopped outside room 409 and looked through the small window in the door. Caroline was sitting on the edge of Mason's bed. Mason was talking, rapidly, enthusiastically, hands moving, and Caroline was laughing, and on the wall above the bed, was a new drawing taped up next to all the others. Nathan could just make out the two stick figures from where he stood, one tall, one small. The label at the bottom read, "Mom and Me, Year 2. He did not knock. He did not go in. Some moments are not his to enter. He just stood there, and something that had been locked up in him for a very long time came loose, quietly, without drama. The way ice thaws, not all at once, but steadily, inevitably, because the temperature has finally changed. He thought about what he had said to a colleague, years ago, in a moment of cold philosophy. Money teaches you to doubt everyone. He had believed that. He had lived by it. He had built his entire interior life around it. And then a woman named Caroline Webb had spent 8 years polishing his floors and keeping every promise she ever made to a dying friend, and raising a child who called her mom without hesitation, and carrying a weight that would have broken most people in two. And she had done it all without asking him for a single thing, without bitterness, without complaint, because that was simply the kind of person she was, and he had almost missed it entirely. Caroline looked up and saw him through the glass. Their eyes met for a moment, just a moment, across the corridor. She gave him a small nod. He returned it, and then she turned back to Mason, who was already showing her the next drawing. Nathan walked back to the elevator. He pressed the button for the lobby. As the doors closed, he took out his phone and called Donna. "Good morning," she said. "Good morning." He paused. "How are you? How are your kids?" A long silence on the other end. "Mr. Cole," Donna said carefully. "Are you all right?" "I think I'm starting to be," he said. 3 months later, Caroline stopped working the night shift at Midway Office Tower. Not because Nathan asked her to. He knew better than to ask her to do anything that touched her independence. But because Mason's recovery had gone well enough that the overnight hospital stays became weekend visits, and the emergency fund Nathan had insisted on setting up meant she no longer lay awake recalculating the math. She still cleaned Nathan's penthouse. She still arrived 2 minutes early. She still made his coffee before he was up. But things were different, not dramatically, not in ways that other people would necessarily notice. Nathan knew her name now. He said it. He asked how Mason was doing, and he listened to the whole answer. He left a note on the kitchen counter one Tuesday morning, just a post-it, nothing grand, that said, "Mason's drawing is on my desk. Hope that's okay." And the drawing was the new one. "Mom and Me, Year 2. He had asked Caroline if he could keep it, and she had looked at him for a moment in that way she had, assessing, quiet, real, and then said yes. It sat in a frame on the corner of his desk in Cole Capital's 42nd floor office for years afterward. Everyone who came in for a meeting noticed it. Most of them assumed it was a grandchild. Nathan never corrected them. He just let it be true. Here is what this story wants to leave you with. Somewhere near you, there is a person carrying something enormous in silence, not because they are weak, not because they do not need help, but because no one has made themselves available enough to be asked. Be the person who makes themselves available. Be the person who learns the name on the badge. Be the person who, when they see someone standing at a window with that look, you know the look, actually stops and says, "Hey, are you okay?" That is all it takes to begin. Sometimes that is everything. If this story moved you, please like this video and subscribe to True Spark Stories. We find the stories that quietly change people, and we tell them the way they deserve to be told. Every comment, every like, every share keeps this channel alive. Thank you for watching all the way to the end. It means more than you know. Do you believe people like Caroline still exist in today's world? Let us know in the comments. And tell us, what would you have done in Nathan's place that night in the hospital corridor? We'll see you in the next story.